Oh, wow. The Who, Tommy. Oh, boy. Where do we even begin here, man? Simply one of rock and roll's most iconic albums with just the most iconic album cover. Man, I love it. The Who, 1-800-449-8255. Now, when The Who in 1968 we're deciding we got to do something major here to get attention. Um, of course, live, the Who are all about smashing their gear, and they were just these rowdy rock and roll rebels, man. But of course, this album is nothing like that. It's pro, it's clean. Um, it's even kind of underdone. It almost sounds like it's incomplete, like it needs something. Uh, I have problems with this album. It's problematic. And growing up in the South Bay, Redondo Beach, Torrance, I even remember, man, people thought this album sucked because they thought the songs were silly and retarded. And, I heard that a lot about The Who, Tommy. But what The Who were trying to do here was mess with your mind in a glorious way. And I understood The Who, Tommy, from the first day I ever heard this album. I was like, it doesn't sound like The Who live, but there's something else going on here. The Who are doing something interesting. Some of this almost sounds like the Beatles, or, you got these three-part harmonies and melodies galore all over this album. It kind of reminds me of Hair, by the Cowsills. But these are four pro musicians here, man. Keith Moon's drumming is phenomenal all over this album. I mean, for his drumming alone, it's like he saves this album because you really can't hear John Entwistle in the mix. Tommy is a really unprofessional bad mix or something. I mean, Kit Lambert was the Who's manager slash producer, and the Who were working with Kit Lambert and just amateur guys who didn't know what they were doing in the studio, and then they recorded this album in a studio that's not one of the best. This album could have been a lot better, and you really get the feeling when you listen to this album that the Who were using the scratch like original tracks, and they didn't have the money to go re-record them. And like the guitar here sounds really underplayed, understated. Pete Townsend, the guy's loud. Marshall Stacks. He's playing either a Strat or a SG, and he's just going crazy live. But when you listen to this album, you don't get that at all. I mean, the crazy Who that smashes their gear and they're just blowing up smoke bombs on stage, and that is not what the Who Tommy is at 1-800-449-8255. But this album does other things. No, this album isn't as good as Led Zeppelin. It's not as good as the Beatles' Abbey Road. It's not as good as the Stones, not even close to Let It Bleed or any of that, or Black Sabbath or the Moody Blues. But the Who do things with this album that those other bands can't do. The Who have a special heart that touches you. And The Who Sell Out, 1967, was such a great album, and it sounds very complete. Armonia City in the Sky, Rail, Parts 1 and 2, I Can See for Miles, and all the jingles in between. It's just an amazing, brilliant album. And unfortunately, in a lot of ways, this album isn't as good as The Who Sell Out. And everybody says that. But this album has things going on, man, that are iconic and hella interesting. Uh, the Who, Tommy, man, this album is iconic. It's epic because for all its flaws and shortcomings and uh, you know, just like it's lacking something, man. I can't put my finger on what it is. It doesn't capture the Who live, and yet it captures something else that is amazing at 1-800-449-8255. The Who mess with your mind with a mystical, magical story that slowly, subliminally takes over your brain. And it isn't for like 25 years that you realize that this album all along was about you. You thought you liked this album for the music and the interesting production and all that. Then one day you realized that that deaf, dumb, and blind boy who woke up on this planet Earth of ours, that was you. This album is about all of us. And, it ain't about like if you were molested or you had older brothers and beat your ass. This is anybody, man. Whether you're going to college and trying to earn a degree, or you're working a shitty job or a good job, or you're going through your life, man. You're trying to meet a girl, you're trying to, get ahead. And this album tells the story of all of us on planet Earth in some unbelievable magic way. This album is not about a deaf, dumb, and blind kid or any of that. That is a metaphor, my friends. This album by The Who is amazing because it's like the only album that reaches into your heart, soul, and your mind, your brain. And this story transcends everything about you and everything about the planet Earth and this matrix, this subliminal simulation that we're all in. Tommy is proof we're in some kind of simulation. And even if God Almighty is just getting his kicks, man, sending us UFOs and dinosaurs and Adam and Eve and weird stuff to just confuse us day in and day out, weird comedy. Well, that's what The Who does, man. The Who are like Frank Zappa on crack, on acid here. They are funny, comedy, silly, retarded, insane. And Tommy is going to take you for a ride, man. Oh, man. This album is amazing. It's iconic. And, the overture, the very first song, is this long, drawn out, beautiful thing with Keith Moon drumming. Almost sounds like Neil Peart, like Rush 2112. It's amazing, but it could have been better, but it's still amazing. And side one is just all amazing on Tommy. The Hawker. Oh man, I remember growing up playing this album over and over and thinking the Who are they're so amazing. And, the instrumental songs, the Who, they're not the world's greatest musicians, and it is highlighted on this album. And yet there's something about the underture, the overture, Sparks, and all that, man, that just convinces you the Who are great. And then, Cousin Kevin and side two and the Acid Queen, Keith Moon narrates it with his drumming. And, the mix on this album is unfortunate because you can't hear John Entwistle, who is just such a monster on bass live with the Who. And Pete Townshend's guitars are just, they're jangly, they're very thin recordings. The acoustic guitar on here is really nice. I mean, Pete shreds. He's incredibly talented when he wants to be. But overall, in general, we all know Pete Townshend, he's not that good on guitar. And none of the Who are that good, man. But they hack together the most brilliant albums. And a lot of it is we're rooting for the Who. We want the Who to be great. And our brain, we make and we create and we force the Who to be the greatest. And then it's funny, it slaps you upside your head one day that the Who are great and Pete is a good guitarist. You go back and watch the videos, like The Kids Are All Right and those other Who live videos, and you're like, wait a minute, Pete really is like Clapton or Jimi Hendrix or Eddie Van Halen live. He's incredible. He's like better than Jimmy Page. But you don't think that, because the media makes us think, oh, Led Zeppelin's so great, and Black Sabbath and Deep Purple and, the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, they're the great ones. And somehow the Who, you don't think of them as great. But you listen to this album, and then later on when they really get good on Who's Next, Quadrophenia, and the Who live, and you realize for what they got, the Who utilize everything in their ammunition, everything in their artillery. The Who torture themselves and they torture you. And you sit there like, damn it, man, I wish the Who were better. And then it hits you one day, there is nothing better than the Who at 1-800-449-8255. And this magical album takes you on an amazing journey. Oh man, I love it. And side 3 is so silly with these fucking lame, horrible, cheesy little songs that are so funny. And they're serious, man. The Who are talking about child abuse and stuff here. And it's almost like Frank Zappa would even be scared to listen to this because it's frightening, man. If you ever grew up in a dysfunctional family, you hear this album and you connect with it, man. All 4 sides. And there's just great songs here. Christmas, Cousin Kevin, Go to the Mirror Boy, The Who, and Pete Townsend and the rock opera storytelling genius is at work here. All 4 sides. And Pete is always writing about you. Not just the fan of the Who, but everyone in the whole world in this matrix on God's planet Earth. Pete is telling a story, and you are the feature, my friend. You are what the story is all about, and Tommy is all about you at 1-800-449-8255. And you go in your day-to-day life and you realize this genius, Pete Townsend, made an album that is just so amazing, genius. And it tells a story of your life and my life, everyone's life. Everyone who's joined the Marines or joined the Army and gone to war, or works in an office building, or is an usher at a stadium, or just a nobody that works at 7-Eleven or Taco Bell or a gas station or Rite Aid. This album tells the story of you. This is the Who at 1-800-449-8255. Tommy. It's funny, it's sad, it's irreverent, it's silly. It is you. And the Who mock your life. Pete Townsend mocks you as he worships you, and you worship Pete at 1-800-449-8255. This iconic album with the amazing cover. It tells the story of the planet Earth better than any other album in the history of rock. It is, man. It's the Who, Tommy. Can you hear me? Can you wake up out there? You sitting naked by the phone, can you touch me? Tommy. It's you, man. For many, many years, you've gone through this earth, and you're not awake. And I'm not talking about the good or bad things that happen to you. You wake up one day, and I don't even know what awake means, but you arise and you awaken, and you discover that Tommy already lived your life like a simulation. It's like that song by Entwistle, 905. Everything you've done, it's been done before. Every sentence in your head, someone else has said. And we go round and round forever, people. As far as we know. this simulation, this earth, this matrix that we're all in. And you see the girl in the red dress, and you see the red pill, you see the blue pill. You don't know if you're awake or asleep, but Tommy, The Who, Pete Townsend, the genius who wrote this amazing album. This album that is so, could have been better, could have been as great as Quadrophenia or Who's Next, but it's not. But that's exactly the way you want it. This captures The Who when they're 23 and they're young. They really don't know what they're doing. And the band was poor, man, in debt. 1968 was a scary year for The Who. They were losing their record label. They were losing everything. And they needed a home run. They needed to hit a ball out of the park. And with their backs against the wall, man, 1968, they had no money. They had nothing. The Who produced this epic, iconic album, Tommy. They went into a studio and they played the whole album to Nick Kahn, a guy at the NME or the Melody Maker. And he said, I just don't hear a single, man. It's kind of okay and good. And at the very last minute, they added Pinball Wizard. And it's so lucky that The Who recorded another amazing song, kind of like I Can See for Miles. Pete pulled Pinball Wizard out of a rabbit out of a hat, and they added it to Tommy. And it has all those distorted guitars on it and the amazing acoustic guitar. And it actually sounds so much better than the rest of this album. And yet it goes perfectly right with this album and this story. At 1-800-449-8255, the Clark the Shark Show. Clark the Shark, the Wolfman Jack on crack. I'm just warming up with my album reviews. I'm going to review many albums because I grew up in the South Bay, Redondo Beach, Torrance, Los Angeles with The Who. I grew up going to South High and Torrance, Newton Parkway, listening to all those bands. Uriah Heep, David Bowie, The Who. All these amazing, amazing albums. But I haven't found one as amazing as Tommy by The Who because of what this album does. What this story does, man. It's transcending. It's transcendental. Like, Pete was into Mayor Baba or something, but this album, man, there's something about it that Led Zeppelin can't do, that the Beatles can't do. The Who take the Beatles another level here. Pink Floyd can't do this. The Stones, they can't do this. David Bowie can't do this. Emerson, Lake and Palmer, yes. Iggy Pop and the Stooges, they can't do this album. This album is too amazing. It's too brilliant. The Who went to the highest level of rock and roll with this album. And everyone tried to copy this album after it. Rush 2112 is based on this album. This amazing album, The Who, Tommy. Underplayed, not well recorded, horrible mix. Can't hear John Entwistle. It's just a horrible sounding album. And yet, if you crank this thing up loud and listen to it, you love The Who and you realize The Who is the greatest, most incredible band because they don't have the talent to make an album this great. Not even close, man. And yet they do. They hack together the most brilliant albums with the meager talent that band has. The Who are not Led Zeppelin. The Who are not John Lennon. They're not Paul McCartney. They're not David Bowie. And yet The Who are better because they're amazing, man. Their vision, their dreams, their imagination. They dream that they're the greatest band in the world at 1-800-449-8255. And then you believe in that dream too. You want to be in a band. You want to form a band because this album, you heard this album. You heard the overture, the underture, Go to the Mirror Boy, Christmas, The Acid Queen, Cousin Kevin, We're Not Gonna Take It, I'm Free, Pinball Wizard, and you said, that's it. I want to fucking play rock and roll. I want to write my own rock opera. Like, I want to be like Tommy. And that's what Yes and Emerson, Lake and Palmer and Rush, every band, even Led Zeppelin, they heard this album and they're like, The Who are the greatest. I gotta be like The Who. At 1-800-449-8255. Every rock and roll band, punk rock, alternative, indie, everything, disco, Uriah Heep, Steve Miller Band, The Grateful Dead. Everybody heard this album and decided we've got to be as great as that. But nobody can be as great as The Who. No way. At 1-800-449-8255. What is The Who, Tommy, on a scale of 1 to 10? This iconic album is like a 20. The most amazing album. It's sold 20 million records around the world. It's one of the biggest albums of all time. And you know what? The people who buy it don't even understand it. They don't even realize it's about them. The Pete Townsend took his dysfunctional life and he channeled it all into an amazing album that's about every one of us. At 1-800-449-8255, The Clark the Shark Show. I can't stop talking about this amazing, brilliant album with all these great, catchy songs. And yet it could have been so much better, but I don't care. They could have added all these overdubs and made it like Quadrophenia, but I don't want that. I like this album just the way it is, and I love The Who just the way they are. The Who, Tommy, iconic, greatest albums ever recorded. This album ain't, a historical great album just for nothing, people. This album is truly amazing because it tells the most important story about all of us. And I'm Clark the Shark at 1-800-449-8255. And I'm out. Peace.